The day we buried our son, the world went silent, but not in the way you'd expect. There was no storm, no dramatic collapse, no screams or wails from either of us. Just a strange, suspended quiet, like the moment right before a car crash. When your body knows something terrible is happening, but your mind hasn't caught up yet. My name is Daniel. I'm 45 years old, a paramedic in northern Colorado. And that morning, as I stood over my son's coffin, I learned what it means to lose. Not just a child, but something inside yourself you never recover. Mateo was 7. That's the kind of number that sticks in your throat. Too young to understand what death means, but old enough to leave 1,000 echoes behind, in drawings taped to the fridge, in superhero pajamas folded under his pillow, in the dent, on the couch where he used to curl up and fall asleep during movies. He got sick quickly, a rare infection. One of those 1 in a million cases doctors warn you about with regret in their eyes. 3 days in the hospital, then gone. The funeral was small. Family, a few close friends, co-workers who tried their best not to look at me too long. Some brought casseroles, others stood stiffly, not knowing what to say to a man who had just lost his entire reason to breathe. I stood next to the coffin in a black suit I hadn't worn since my own father's funeral. I didn't feel human, just hollow, like my body was present, but the rest of me had been buried alongside my son. Mariana, my wife, stood to my left. She looked perfect. That's the word that still haunts me. Perfect. Her hair was neatly pinned, lips lightly painted, face hidden behind expensive black sunglasses. Not a hair out of place, not a tear in sight. When they lowered Mateo's small white coffin into the ground, I felt my knees tremble. My chest caved in like someone had kicked it in. I wanted to scream, to fall in after him, to grab the box and say, "No, you can't have him. He's mine." But I didn't. I stood still, gripping the side of the casket like it could anchor me to the earth. Mariana touched the top briefly, placed a single white rose, then stepped back. No prayer, no whispered goodbye, just a gesture. Polished and distant. When the ceremony ended, I sat on a stone bench near the grave. People came and went, patting my shoulder, saying things like, "He's in a better place," or "You're strong, Daniel." I nodded because it was easier than falling. Mariana approached me after a few minutes. I looked up, expecting her to hold my hand, to say something, anything, human. Instead, she adjusted her purse strap and said in the same tone she used when asking about grocery lists, "Did you check if the insurance covers everything?" For a second, I thought I misheard her. My ears were ringing. Maybe my brain filled in the wrong words. "What?" I asked, barely able to speak. She lowered her voice a little, glanced around and repeated, "The life insurance." "Mateo's? Did you look into it yet?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mind had gone blank. Insurance? 2 hours after burying our son. She turned and walked off before I could even process it. I watched her go stand next to her sister. They lit cigarettes and murmured quietly. One of them laughed. I still don't know what that laugh was about. Maybe it had nothing to do with Mateo, but in that moment it felt like the cruelest sound I'd ever heard. That night the house felt different. Not just quiet, hollow. I could still smell Mateo's shampoo on the towel in the bathroom. His shoes were by the front door. His last drawing, a lopsided T-Rex, was still hanging on the fridge with a magnet that said, "World's Best Dad." I poured 2 cups of coffee. One for me, one for her. An old habit. I brought hers into the living room. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Here," I said quietly. She took the mug without looking up, placed it on the table. Never took a sip. A minute later, she posted a photo from the funeral. Mateo's casket, the crowd of mourners, no caption, just hashtags. "Faisti see goodbye, Mateo. Marcia, rest in peace." Something in me cracked then, not loudly, not violently, just a soft internal fracture, like a rope snapping in the dark. I stood up, took both mugs back to the kitchen and dumped the coffee down the sink. The clink of ceramic on metal echoed through the room. It was the only sound for hours. Later that night, I walked into Mateo's room. The air was still. His blanket was slightly wrinkled, like he might come back any second to tuck himself in. I sat on the bed and picked up his favorite stuffed dinosaur, the one he never slept without, and finally I cried. Not the kind of crying people see in movies, not fists pounding the wall or howling into the night. No, this was quiet, ragged, a slow collapse. The kind of grief that makes no sound but steals all your strength. I stayed there for a long time, holding that stuffed dinosaur like it was the only thing keeping me from disappearing. Mariana never came to find me, never checked in. I don't even know if she noticed I wasn't beside her. She slept through the night without a word, and me, I lay there, crushed by silence. I told myself then, she's grieving differently. That's all. People shut down in different ways. Maybe she's in shock, maybe she's trying to hold it together for me. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it, because there's a kind of silence that comforts. And then there's the kind that warns you. This was the second kind. Looking back now, that coffee she didn't drink, the way she asked about insurance at the graveside, the Instagram post with hashtags and no tears, they weren't signs of shock, they were clues that I had missed completely, and I had no idea that while I was breaking in silence, she was already planning her exit. People say you don't notice when something begins to break, that it starts small, a hairline fracture, a quiet shift, and by the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late. Looking back, I can tell you the exact moment my marriage started to crack. But back then I missed every sign. We met 9 years ago. I was responding to a gas leak call. Standard procedure. Get people out of their homes, make sure the air's clear, call in the fire crew. Mariana was standing outside her apartment, holding a trembling golden retriever wrapped in a towel. She looked at me like I'd just walked out of a burning building holding a baby, even though I'd only told her to stand back and breathe through a cloth. We talked while the crews cleared the building. She was magnetic, not loud, not flashy, but sharp. Every word seemed deliberate. She had this stillness to her, like she'd already calculated every outcome and was just waiting for people to catch up. I was 36, working overtime shifts, eating. In my car most nights, thinking about maybe settling down, maybe not. And here she was, calm, composed, curious about my world. I fell fast. 6 months later, we were living together. A year in, we got married in a small ceremony in Boulder. She didn't want anything big. Just us, she said. Simple is sacred. That line stuck with me. It felt real. At first, everything worked. We moved into a small house in Fort Collins. I covered the night shifts. She handled the home, the bills, the grocery lists I'd always forget. We had routines. She brought me lunch when I was on call, left notes on the fridge. For a while I really believed we were solid. Then Mateo was born. He was early, fragile but perfect. I remember the first time I saw her hold him. She looked overwhelmed, not in awe, more like panic, carefully hidden. I chalked it up to hormones, exhaustion, new mum fear. But even in those early weeks, something shifted in her. She became quieter, not sad, just absent. Some days she would rock Mateo in silence for hours. Other days she'd disappear into the bathroom and come out looking blank, like she'd taken off not just her makeup but her emotions too. I told myself she was tired. So I took on more shifts. I thought money would help, I thought space would help, it didn't. By the time Mateo was 3, Mariana had started going out more. Girls' nights, yoga retreats, weekend visits to her sister in Santa Fe. She always told me ahead of time, always smiled, always said, "I'll be back Sunday night." And she always came back, but each time she came back less. It's hard to explain, but she started to feel like a guest in our home. She no longer asked about my calls, didn't seem interested in Mateo's drawings or his obsession with dinosaurs. Her side of the bed stayed perfectly made some nights. Her clothes were always crisp, folded, untouched. She existed next to us, not with us. And still, I didn't say anything because I didn't want to break it. Whatever this was, maybe. Just a phase, maybe grief or pressure or boredom. I figured if I didn't poke it, it might pass. But silence is a coward's gamble, and I lost. I remember one night clearly. Mateo had just turned 5. He had a nightmare and came crying into our room. I picked him up, brought him to bed, and let him curl up between us. Mariana didn't even stir. I lay there, holding my son, listening to his breathing slow down, feeling the warmth of his small hand gripping my shirt. I turned to look at Mariana, her back to us, body curled away, still as stone. I couldn't tell if she was asleep or just pretending. That was the first time I thought, maybe I'm in this alone. Months passed, then years. Mateo grew. Mariana drifted. I tried to glue things together the only way I knew how, a structure, responsibility, showing up every day. I packed school lunches, I went to every parent-teacher meeting, I read bedtime stories until I was hoarse. She came to the big events, birthdays, school plays, always dressed perfectly, always on time. But emotionally, she never stepped past the front row. One afternoon I came home early and found her sitting on the bathroom floor, knees pulled to her chest, eyes red. I knelt beside her. "What's going on?" I asked softly. She looked at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong house. "It's nothing," she said. "Just tired. It's fine." I reached for her hand. She pulled it away. "Don't make this a thing, Daniel. Please, I just need a minute." She left the room before I could say anything else. That moment stayed with me, and the way she recoiled, not from pain, from intimacy, like my concern was a threat. I stopped trying after that, not in a bitter way, just quietly. I gave her the space she seemed to crave, moved more and more of my life into Mateo's orbit. He needed me, he wanted me. He laughed when I tickled him, jumped into my arms when I got home, left drawings on my pillow that said Super Dad. He became my anchor, and I think in her eyes, he became my weakness. The last year before Mateo died was the most distant we'd ever been. She still smiled in photos, still kissed me on the cheek when others were watching, but in private, we were two people living side by side in silence, co-parents, housemates, not enemies, just empty. One night, she came home, late. I didn't ask where she'd been. She poured a glass of wine, sat down and scrolled through her phone like I wasn't there. I remember thinking, she's already halfway gone. But then I looked at Mateo, sprawled on the rug, humming to himself. Has he colored a giant blue dinosaur? And I told myself, if he's okay, I can be okay too. I didn't know it then, but I was already preparing to survive without her. I just didn't think I'd have to survive without both of them. I always thought abandonment would come like a storm. A door slammed, a suitcase thrown down the stairs, yelling, crying, accusations. But when she left, it was silent, not quiet like peace, quiet like death. 3 weeks had passed since Mateo's funeral. The days blurred into one another. I stopped checking the calendar, stopped answering calls. People were kind at first. Texts came in, "Thinking of you, brother. Here if you need anything." Then they slowed, then stopped. Grief isolates you in a way few things can. You start to wonder if the world actually moved on, or if you were the one who slipped into a different timeline. One where everyone else could breathe and you just couldn't. That morning I left early. I couldn't stay in the house any longer. I drove without direction past the diner Mateo loved, past the park where he once broke his arm falling from the monkey bars. I ended up parked outside the hospital, just sitting in my truck, for hours. I came back home just after noon. The sky had turned grey, there was a chance of snow, but inside, it was colder. The front door was unlocked. That was the first sign. When I stepped inside, I felt it. Something was off. Not dramatic, just slightly wrong, like walking into a room where the picture frames are all tilted. Her coat was gone, her shoes. The hook where she hung her purse every day for the past 8 years was empty. I walked into the bedroom, slowly, like I expected to find her asleep, but the closet doors were open, hangers swinging slightly. Half the closet was bare, her drawers were empty, jewelry box gone, makeup counter cleared. On the floor, one of Mateo's old socks, crumpled, like a forgotten afterthought in her escape. I opened the bathroom. Her toiletries, gone. Her perfume no longer lingered in the air, just sterile nothing. It was surgical, precise. I went downstairs to check the kitchen. The fridge had been cleaned out. Even the wine, her favorite bottle, was missing. No note, no text, nothing. For a second, I thought maybe she'd gone to stay with her sister for the night. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe she just needed air. But when I walked into the study and opened the drawer where we kept our documents, my blood went cold. The folder labeled Insurance was missing. I rushed to my computer, opened our bank account. Access denied. I tried again, logging in under my personal user. Your joint account has been closed. I stared at the screen. My hands started shaking. I clicked over to my email and found it. An automated message from the bank dated 2 days prior. Your joint savings account ending in 2934 has been closed at the request of co-holder Mariana Ortega. Please contact your branch for further assistance. I just sat there reading that sentence again and again, not even reacting. Like my brain refused to process what it meant. I texted her. Where are you? No response. We need to talk. Delivered. No read receipt. I waited 15 minutes. Then I called, straight to voicemail. When the silence became unbearable, I got in the truck and drove to her sister's house. A long shot, but I needed something. A clue, a confrontation, a denial even. Her sister opened the door with surprise. Daniel, I thought you were working. Where is she? I asked. She hesitated, looked behind her, then stepped outside and closed the door behind her. She left town. When? This morning, early. She said she needed to get away. Did she say anything else? She shook her head, but her eyes didn't meet mine. Back home, I collapsed onto the couch. The house didn't just feel empty now. It felt abandoned, like even the walls knew she wasn't coming back. That night, around 2 a.m., my phone lit up. A message from her, one paragraph. Daniel, I can't do this anymore. I can't stay in that house with all that pain. It's too heavy. I need to find a way to live again. I hope you understand. That was it. No mention of the money. No mention of the account. No mention of Mateo. Just her own pain. Her own need to live. I read it twice. Then once more. And instead of crying, I felt nothing. That scared me. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't even angry. Because somewhere, deep down, I'd known. I think I started grieving her long before Mateo died. Maybe it was in the way she stopped touching my hand when I spoke. Maybe in the way she left the room during Mateo's bedtime stories, or how she took longer and longer trips, came back smelling like hotel soap and unfamiliar wine. I don't know. But I knew, and I ignored it. That night, I walked into Mateo's room, sat on the floor beside his empty bed, pulled his favorite stuffed dinosaur into my lap, and stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars we'd stuck to the ceiling. I stayed there until the sun started to rise. Around 6 a.m., I walked back to my office, sat down, and reopened my computer. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I clicked through folders trying to distract myself. Then I saw a PDF I didn't recognize. Claim form Insure Mateo. PDF. I opened it. It was an insurance claim, filed in Mariana's name. 3 days after the funeral, my hand froze on the mouse. Attached to the claim was a scanned document, a supposed custody agreement stating she was Mateo's sole legal guardian. It had my signature, my name, my date. I never signed it. The breath left my lungs. She hadn't just walked away. She hadn't just taken the money. She had planned this. I clicked through the metadata. The form had been edited, printed, and submitted from our home computer, filed directly to the insurance company. I checked my email again. Buried deep in the spam folder was a confirmation notice. Your claim has been processed. Funds have been released to the designated account. I sat back in the chair, cold all over. My chest hurt, but not from sadness. It was something darker, heavier. She had used our son's death as an opportunity, and suddenly all the pieces snapped into place, and the timing, the questions, the wine, the coldness. She hadn't broken because of the loss. She had been waiting for it. And now, she was gone, with everything. I didn't sleep that night. I don't think I even blinked. I just sat there, frozen in front of my computer screen, staring at the PDF that confirmed what I hadn't let myself believe. Mariana hadn't just left. She hadn't just emptied our bank account or disappeared without warning or sent a cold clinical goodbye message. She had filed a life insurance claim for our dead son behind my back. 3 days after the funeral, and she'd forged my signature to do it. The document was clear. Claimant, Mariana Ortega. Beneficiary status, sole custodial parent. Attached was a scanned custody agreement, complete with what looked like my signature, a fake notary stamp, and a date. Except I never signed anything like that, and we never had any formal custody arrangement. We were married. We were raising Mateo together. This was premeditated. This wasn't grief. It was strategy. I started going through everything. I pulled out drawers, old files, envelopes. I opened her desk. It was cleaner than I remembered. Too clean. Like someone had done a final sweep. That's when I found it. A small flash drive, taped underneath the drawer. Almost missed it. No label, just black plastic and dust. I plugged it in. It held scanned documents, insurance statements, bank transfers, an Excel spreadsheet titled Finances JMJM, my son's initials. I opened the sheet. It listed accounts I didn't recognize, transfers, dates, names, Mariana's name, and another, a man's, all of it in one folder, like she had prepared it for review, or for control, or maybe she just liked to keep track of what she stole. I felt my stomach twist. There's a point in grief where pain becomes numbness, but this burned. It wasn't just betrayal, it was calculation. She had planned this. Not in the fog of mourning, not after the funeral, before, and I had been too broken to see it. I thought about calling the police, about storming into a bank, about driving to wherever she was hiding and demanding answers. But something stopped me, not fear, something colder. Clarity. I knew how this worked. I'd seen it in my job, people who screamed at the ER desk, thinking volume would get them answers. It never worked. You don't fight a fire with chaos, you fight it with control. So I opened a notebook and started writing everything down. Dates, file names, amounts, websites. I printed what I could, backed up the flash drive, and I made a decision. This wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about truth. The next morning I called a lawyer. I didn't know him well, and he was a friend of a friend, someone I'd helped once after an accident. His name was Miguel. He didn't ask why I needed to talk, just gave me a time and an address. I walked into his office, dropped the folder of printed documents on his desk and said, "My wife committed fraud. I think she used my son's death to steal from me. I need to know what I can do." Miguel was calm, quiet, professional. He scanned the first few pages, his brow tightening with every line. When he finished, he looked up and said, "This is bad, but it's also clean. She left a trail. You did the right thing coming here first." He explained the process. Insurance fraud, forged signatures, possible identity theft, civil charges, maybe even criminal depending on how deep it went. Then he looked at me and asked, "Do you want to pursue this publicly or quietly?" I didn't hesitate. Quietly, for now. We made a plan. He'd start with a cease and desist to the insurance company, freezing any future activity. We'd file a motion to retrieve full banking records, and he'd contact a private investigator to track Mariana's movements and confirm her location. Because we needed more than suspicion, we needed evidence. 2 days later, I met the investigator. His name was Jorge, former cop, sharp eyes, said little, but what he said mattered. I gave him everything. Mariana's last known locations, her sister's address, photos, the name from the spreadsheet. The man I suspected was helping her. He nodded once and said, "Give me 48 hours." He only needed 36. When he called, his voice was flat. "She's in Cancun, 5-star resort, registered under her maiden name. She's not alone." He sent photos. There she was, poolside, sunglasses, drink in hand, smiling. Next to her, the man from the spreadsheet, arm around her waist, matching bracelets, not mourning, not healing, celebrating. The report included receipts, luxury suite paid in full, spa treatments, shopping sprees. paid with a new account, one that hadn't existed 2 months ago. I remember sitting on my couch holding those photos and feeling something unexpected, relief, because now it wasn't just a feeling, now it was real. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't bitter, I was right. And with that came something stronger than pain, purpose. Miguel moved fast. With Jorge's report, we had enough to file formal fraud allegations. We submitted the documents to the insurance company, who froze the payout under investigation. But it got better. Jorge found more. He dug into Mariana's past. She'd lived in 3 states over the past 15 years, 2 marriages, 1 bankruptcy, 1 sealed lawsuit from a former partner, financial misconduct, never convicted, settled quietly. A pattern. She had done this before, used charm, presence, intimacy, then vanished with control of the assets. Only this time, she went too far. She used a child, our child, and she thought I'd be too broken to notice. That night, I sat down again at Mateo's desk, the one I hadn't touched since he died. His crayons were still in a tin. His last drawing, folded in half, it was a house. Stick figures holding hands labeled Papa and Yo. Mariana wasn't in it. I don't think that meant anything, but maybe it did. I whispered to the empty, "Drumasant, I'm going to make this right, Mateo, I promise." Then I went to bed for the first time in weeks and slept. Grief numbs you. Betrayal wakes you up. By the time I sat across from Miguel and Jorge in that small downtown office, I wasn't crying anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was something else. Focused, sharp, quiet, like someone who'd just walked out of a burning building and was ready to build again. Not from hope, but from necessity. The kind of necessity that comes when your entire world has been reduced to ashes by the person who claimed to love you. We had the documents, the screenshots, the transfers, photos of Mariana sunbathing in Cancun with another man just weeks after burying our son. I'd watched them a dozen times, her laughing beside a pool, drink in hand, her black swimsuit contrasting the white linen of the cabana she lounged in. Grieving widow? No. She looked free, and something about that made it easier to move forward, because that version of her, the calculated, distant, smiling after-theft version, wasn't the woman I married. She had taken off her mask. And now I could stop grieving the illusion. Miguel leaned forward, hands clasped. "Daniel, this case isn't just strong, it's airtight. You've done your part, now we move." He outlined the next steps. Formal fraud complaints filed. Temporary. Injunctions on the disputed funds. A private request to the resort in Cancun for security footage and transaction logs. We were building a case brick by brick. But what struck me most was how calm I felt. No boiling rage, no urge to scream. Just a plan, and that it felt like survival. I started living on a schedule again, morning runs, afternoon calls, long late nights reviewing emails and compiling documents with Miguel. I built a timeline, from the first insurance policy Mariana suggested we take out on Mateo 7 months before his death, to the forged custody agreement, to the bank's activity 2 days after the funeral. Everything she did had a timestamp, everything had logic, and the more I studied it, the more I understood. This wasn't a spontaneous act born of grief. It was a long game, and I'd just been a piece on her. Bored one afternoon, Jorge called me. His voice had that tone, serious but pleased. Got something. He sent over a short audio clip, an interview with a man named Julian, mid-40s, lived in New Mexico. Jorge had found him through an old tax record tied to Mariana's maiden name. "She was my wife," Julian said in the recording. "Left me after I was diagnosed with lymphoma. Took everything while I was in chemo." He described how she drained his accounts, claimed joint assets, vanished. No criminal charges, no trail. Just a shell of a marriage and a silence that lasted years. "She said I was too much to carry," he added. "Said I reminded her of death. Funny how she kept the life insurance money, though." I sat there, jaw clenched. It wasn't just me. She'd done this before. Miguel filed a request to speak with Julian directly. His story added precedent to our case. And wait. This wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a pattern, a history of manipulation, abandonment, and financial abuse. I wasn't her first victim, but I was determined to be her last. I started to see my house differently, not as the crime scene of a broken life, but as evidence. The quiet corners, the drawers she emptied, the closet she cleared with surgical precision. Even Matteo's room, untouched since the night he died, became sacred ground. I didn't enter it anymore out of sadness. I entered it like a soldier in prayer. One night I opened his small desk and found a photo tucked into the back of a drawer. It was from the summer before. Matteo standing between us at the lake, arms wide, squinting in the sun. Mariana had her hand on his shoulder, her face half turned. I looked tired but proud. I stared at it for a long time, then slipped it into my wallet. Not to carry the pain, but to remember what mattered. He was still my son, and I still had a duty to him, even if he wasn't here to see it. Weeks passed, quietly, precisely. The insurance company froze Mariana's claim pending investigation. The funds were locked. Her account was flagged. Jorge located new financial activity, wire transfers made to an offshore account. Miguel included that in the fraud case. We contacted Mariana officially through legal notice. No response. Not a single word. She was hiding behind the man from Cancun. His name, we discovered, was Eric Toledo, small business owner, history of bankruptcy, 2 civil suits for contract fraud. A perfect match. We requested financial records under Eric's name, traced back some of the insurance money being funneled through his company, fake invoices, personal transfers disguised as consulting fees. Miguel smiled when he saw the paperwork. She got sloppy. She got comfortable. I corrected. That was her real mistake. She thought I'd stay down, but I wasn't down. I was building a case. And in the middle of all that, the files, the court documents, the statements, I did something I hadn't done since the day Matteo died. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Not because I was okay, but because I knew I was going to be. Grief doesn't go away, it just changes shape. And mine had become something sharp, focused, not to hurt, not to punish, but to protect. The memory of Matteo, the truth, myself. Miguel scheduled the court date. Mariana would be served in person, with officers present. Jorge confirmed she was still in Cancun, using a new identity at the resort, likely thinking the lack of communication was protecting her. It wasn't. The trap was set, and all I had to do was wait. But I wasn't just waiting. I was preparing, going over statements, securing testimony from Julian, gathering financial analysts to explain the offshore activity. We were assembling a puzzle, and the full picture was coming into view. This wasn't about getting money back. It wasn't about pride. It was about showing the world and myself that I wouldn't be defined by what she took, because she hadn't just tried to steal a payout. She tried to steal my grief, my story, my dignity, and now I was taking it back. They say when you tug on one thread, the whole web starts to move. I thought Mariana's betrayal ended with the money, with a forged signature, a frozen account, a cowardly message sent after midnight. But that was just the outer thread. Beneath, it was something much darker, much older. A pattern. Jorge, ever methodical, ever quiet, called me one morning with that low, purposeful tone I had come to recognize. We need to talk. You'll want to sit down for this. He arrived with a manila folder thicker than anything he'd brought before. It was heavy. Not physically, psychologically. Before he even opened it, I felt it press on my chest. He started laying out the contents slowly, like evidence in a trial. Your wife. Mariana Ortega has lived under 5 different legal names in the past 15 years. I blinked. What? He nodded. Tapped the documents. Mariana Ortega, Mariana Serrano, Maria C. Ortiz, Marla Ochoa, and once, just Ana Toledo. All variations, all traceable. Different cities, different men, same pattern. He continued. Under each name, there were common threads. A relationship with a man who had either a medical condition, a recent loss, or a financial hardship. Rapid, emotional attachment, Marriage, cohabitation, or shared financial accounts within months. Gradual distancing. Then sudden disappearances, always tied to financial irregularities. There were 2 divorces, 1 sealed lawsuit, and 3 open accusations of fraud. None of them ever pursued formally. The men walked away bruised and humiliated, most of them unwilling to relive it publicly. Until now, Jorge had contacted 2 of them directly. One was Julian, the cancer patient Mariana left during chemo. The other was a man named Roberto, a small business owner from Texas, who claimed she emptied his accounts and broke something inside him he didn't know could break. Both agreed to testify if needed. Both sent written statements. Both used the same phrase unprompted. "She knows when you're weakest, that's when she moves." I remember sitting there trying to breathe slowly as Jorge laid it all out. It wasn't just me. It wasn't even about me. I was one stop in a long chain of damage. She was a professional, not in the legal sense. Not some Ocean's 11 con artist with fake passports and heists. No, Mariana's profession was emotional engineering. She studied grief like a science. She knew what guilt sounded like. She knew how to mirror love, how to nod at the right time, touch your arm at just the right moment, cry just enough. Not too much, just enough. I thought back to the day we met. The gas leak, the dog, the quiet gratitude in her voice. Had it been a setup, a coincidence she weaponized, or had I just been ripe for the picking? Either way, I wasn't angry anymore. I was stunned. And strangely, clear. Because when you understand the system, you can dismantle it. Miguel was thrilled with the findings. He added the new testimonies to our case file, reframing our approach. This wasn't just insurance fraud now. This was a documented history of emotional exploitation, financial abuse, and calculated manipulation. We drafted a motion to reclassify the nature of our legal argument. No longer just about one act, but a pattern of behavior, a predatory scheme. The judge accepted the amendment. That was the turning point. Once reclassified, we could subpoena past legal records, including ones previously sealed due to privacy agreements. Jorge found one more, a former roommate of Mariana's from Arizona. A woman, no romantic ties, but she told Jorge something that chilled me. She used to rehearse lines in the mirror, arguments, apologies. She'd smile at herself, try different tones like she was auditioning for pain. That line stayed with me, rehearsing grief, rehearsing love, rehearsing me. By now, Mariana still hadn't responded to anything official. Miguel's legal notices had been sent. The insurance company had suspended the payout. The bank accounts were frozen. The offshore transfers were being investigated. She was silent. But silence doesn't protect you from truth. Jorge got one last piece of the puzzle. Footage from the resort. He'd called in a favor from a security consultant who used to work hotel security for high-profile clients. In the footage, dated exactly 17 days after our son's funeral, Mariana and her new partner, Eric Toledo, were filmed laughing at a beachside bar, clinking glasses, kissing. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't grieving. She was celebrating. And now that we had it on tape, I watched that video 3 times. The first time I was stunned. The second time I felt a tightness in my chest. The third time I just stared. Not at her, but at me. The version of me she had counted on. Broken, paralyzed, too kind to fight back. But that version was gone, and she didn't know who she was about to face. Miguel finalized the legal packet for court submission. Jorge and I spent a full day organizing our timeline, testimonies, audio clips, and financial trail. When we finished, Miguel looked across the table and said, "This is bigger than you think." I nodded. I already knew, he continued. "You're not just going after a fraud, you're exposing a system, a cycle, and when it breaks publicly, it's going to rattle everything she's built." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said, "Good." Later that night, I walked into Mateo's room for the first time in weeks. It felt different now. Not like a tomb, not like a shrine, like a place where something honest had lived. I sat on the edge of his bed, opened the small notebook he used to scribble in, and found one last drawing I hadn't noticed before. It was a picture of me. Just me, a big smile, a heart drawn above my head, and in tiny crooked letters at the bottom, Papa Fuerte. Strong Dad. I exhaled, because maybe I hadn't protected him from her, but I could protect his name, his legacy. The truth. I stood up, turned off the light, and closed the door. Behind me was silence, but this time it didn't feel like loss. It felt like something was coming together. And Mariana. She had spent years building a web, but I wasn't stuck in it anymore. I was the one holding the scissors. Some people imagine justice as loud, a dramatic courtroom, voices raised, someone pounding a table. But the real kind, the kind that lasts, it comes in silence, not because it's weak, but because the truth doesn't have to shout. It just has to arrive. The day Mariana was served, she didn't see it coming. Jorge had tracked her to a new hotel, not the beachside resort anymore. She'd downgraded slightly. Still luxurious, still funded with money that didn't belong to her, but quieter, more discreet. Too late for that. She was wearing white linen again, like she was trying to erase the image of mourning widow with something breezier, lighter, like reinvention came with a new zip code and a tan. The process server approached, her at breakfast. Mariana Ortega? She looked up from her plate, confused, slightly irritated. The envelope was placed gently on the table, along with the words that would start the unraveling. You've been served. She called me that night, first time in over a month. No apology, no emotion, just panic masked in control. Daniel, I don't understand what all this is. Fraud, offshore accounts. You're making this ugly when it doesn't have to be. I said nothing. She went on. I was grieving. I made mistakes, yes, but you're twisting things. You're letting people put ideas in your head. Is this really what Mateo would have wanted? Ah, there it was. His name, used like a shield. That was the last time she said it. I ended the call without replying, because there are moments when silence speaks louder than justice. The court hearing was set for 3 weeks later. Civil fraud, asset recovery, and formal accusations of intentional financial misrepresentation tied to an emotional event. Language that doesn't scream but crushes slowly, like a glacier moving through a town. Miguel prepped me thoroughly. He said, "You don't need to speak unless you want to. Let the evidence do the talking." I nodded, but I would speak. Just once. Not to convince the court, to reclaim the truth. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. No jury, just a judge, 2 attorneys, and the steady hum of a fan that sounded too loud. In the quiet moments, Mariana arrived exactly 4 minutes late, hair perfect, makeup subtle, a black dress she must have thought gave her credibility, or sympathy. I didn't flinch when I saw her. I looked at her the same way I'd look at a file, something to be reviewed, understood, and closed. Miguel began. He walked the court through the timeline. The insurance claim filed days after Mateo's funeral, the forged documents, the mismatched bank statements, the wire transfers into shell companies linked to her new partner. He spoke calmly, almost dispassionately, letting the facts pile like bricks until the weight became undeniable. Then came the testimony. First, Julian, her ex-husband, the man, she left during chemotherapy. He described how she slowly separated him from his assets under the guise of helping with the stress, how she used his diagnosis to gain legal access to his financials, how she disappeared just weeks before, his remission, leaving behind debt and silence. Then Roberto, the small business owner from Texas. Same story, different state, different method, same result. Each voice added another layer of pattern, of proof. By the time Jorge presented the surveillance footage, Mariana clinking glasses with Eric Toledo on a beach in Cancun, 18 days after our son's funeral, she stopped looking up. Her eyes dropped to the table. Her fingers clenched the fabric of her skirt. But still, no tears, no anger, just calculation. Trying perhaps to find a new angle. There wasn't one left. Then the judge asked if I wanted to speak. I stood up, straightened my jacket. And for the first time in weeks, I looked directly at Mariana, not with rage, with clarity. This isn't about money, I began. This is about trust, about what someone does when you're at your most broken. I kept my voice even, calm, almost clinical. When we lost our son, I thought I had nothing left to lose. I thought the silence in our home was grief, but it wasn't. It was a wall, one you built long before he died. She shifted in her seat. I didn't flinch. You didn't just take money. You took the right to mourn him honestly. You used his death as a transaction, a strategy, and you thought I'd be too broken to notice. I looked to the judge then, not to plead, just to conclude. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to make sure she doesn't do this again, to anyone. And I sat down. That was all I needed to say. The ruling came 2 weeks later. Full liability, asset seizure, civil damages, criminal referral. Her accounts were drained, legally. This time, the insurance company pursued reimbursement. Eric Toledo disappeared once the charges dropped. No contact, no defense. She was alone, not imprisoned, not yet. But stripped of leverage, and more importantly, exposed. Miguel looked at me after the verdict and said, "This is what accountability looks like." I nodded, but I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. She sent me a message a few days later. One last attempt, not to apologize, Matt, but to rewrite the narrative. It read, "I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to survive in my own way." I didn't reply, because survival built on someone else's grave isn't survival. It's desecration, and I'd already buried one person I loved. I wasn't about to let her bury the truth too. Later that week, I went back to the cemetery. Just me. No cameras, no suit. I stood in front of Mateo's grave with a cup of his favorite juice, grape in a superhero bottle, and placed it beside the stone. The wind was soft. The silence was real this time. Not heavy, not hollow, just still, I whispered. "We're okay now, kiddo. She can't hurt us anymore." Then I turned and walked away, not as a victim, not as a man abandoned, but as a man who faced the fire and refused to let it burn his soul. Peace doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It doesn't announce itself with music or light. Sometimes it sneaks in quietly, on a Tuesday morning with no one watching. Mine came in the form of a half-empty house and a deep breath I didn't know. I was still capable of taking. After the court ruling, things didn't suddenly get better. There were no applause tracks, no parades, just small shifts. Quiet ones. I started with the simplest task. I cleaned the kitchen. It sounds ridiculous, but after everything, the funeral, the silence, the betrayal, it was the first act that felt normal. I emptied drawers, scrubbed corners, threw out spices we'd bought together. I made space. Not just in the cabinets, in me. I took down the photo of us, the wedding one, the one where I'm smiling too wide and she's leaning in like she means it. I replaced it with a photo of Mateo, taken on his 6th birthday, cake on his face. Eyes bright, that one stayed. The house changed with me. Mariana's perfume was gone, her books, her boxes, her presents, all cleared, not with violence, but with ceremony, like sweeping out the ashes after a long, cold fire. One room at a time, I reclaimed my space. Mateo's room was last. I stood at the doorway for a long time before walking in. Everything was as we'd left it. Toys still on the shelf, drawings still taped to the wall. The bed perfectly made, untouched, like a memory in glass. I sat on the edge and let my hand run over the sheets. Then I opened a box. A wooden one. I'd made years ago, originally meant for keepsakes. Slowly I placed inside his favorite toy dinosaur, a few of his drawings, the shoes he always kicked off at the door, and the blanket he used to drag around the house. I closed the lid and locked it, not to forget, but to protect. Some things deserve preservation. I called my sister after that, told her I was okay. She cried, then packed a bag and came to stay with me for a while. It wasn't because I needed help. It was because, for the first time, I had space for company again. She helped repaint the living room. We picked out new curtains, cooked meals in silence that wasn't sad, just peaceful. One night she said, "I can't believe you stayed this calm through it all." And I answered honestly, I didn't stay calm. I just refused to let her destroy what was left of him in me. That was the line I held on to. Through court, through discovery, through the long nights that felt like falling. I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was fighting for what was real, for what Mariana couldn't touch, my love for my son, my capacity to remember him without bitterness. I went back to work part-time. Not the long shifts I used to take, but enough to feel useful again. My co-workers welcomed me gently. No questions, just presence. The same people who'd stood quietly behind me at the funeral now passed me coffee, let me breathe, let me rebuild. One afternoon I taught a first aid course to a group of teenage volunteers. And halfway through I found myself smiling, really smiling, as one of the kids tried to wrap a bandage and ended up taping his own thumb to the dummy's head. It was the kind of laugh I hadn't felt in months, the kind that comes from the belly, not the throat, and I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was healing. Mariana never responded after her last message. No appeal, no apology, she disappeared. The money was partially recovered, enough to close the accounts, settle the case, and cover the costs of everything she'd taken. I didn't get it all back, but I didn't need to, because peace can't be measured in numbers. It's measured in how many nights you sleep through, in how you exhale in silence, in the way your shoulders no longer feel like they're carrying the dead. One morning I went to the cemetery alone. No flowers, no speech, just me. I sat by Mateo's grave and talked. Not out loud, just quietly, from that place where fathers speak to sons they can no longer touch. I told him the truth, about what happened, about how much I missed him, about how I'd tried to do right by his name. And then, without thinking, I said, "I'm okay, bud. You don't have to worry anymore." Don't know where it came from, but I meant it. Back home I opened my laptop and wrote a letter, not to Mariana, not to the court, to myself. A letter I never planned to send but needed to write. It said, "You didn't fail, you believed, you loved. You gave everything you had to your son, and someone took advantage of that. But she didn't win, because you're still standing, and he's still with you. And you chose dignity over destruction." I printed it, folded it, and placed it inside Mateo's box. It was the last thing I added. People ask how I survived it, how I didn't fall apart completely. And the truth is, I did fall apart, but I didn't stay broken, because grief is not the end of the story. It's the middle. It's the place where you decide what parts of yourself are worth carrying forward. And I chose to carry the best parts, the part of me that reads bedtime stories, even when there's no one in the bed. The part that stops when I hear a child laugh in a park. The part that still wears the bracelet Mateo made me out of yarn and beads. Frayed, faded, but sacred. That's what she couldn't take. Not with money, not with lies, not with silence. This story isn't about betrayal. It's about what happens after, about how we rebuild, quietly, patiently, without needing applause. And maybe someone out there is listening, someone who feels broken, used, alone. To them, I say this: you're not. What they did to you, you're who you decide to become afterward. And if this story gave you something, a spark, a breath, a moment of strength, then don't go quietly, subscribe, because we tell stories here that others are too afraid to share. Stories of pain, yes, but also of survival, of dignity, of truth. And sometimes that's all it takes to begin again.